My name is Marin. I'm 36. And this is something I've never said out loud, not to my friends, not to my sister, not even to myself in the mirror. But I think I knew at the moment he walked out the door. He never planned on coming back. The last thing he said to me before he disappeared was, "You should have married your son's real dad." Not our son. Your son. As if 6 years of wiping noses, packing lunches, and singing lullabies didn't count for anything. I don't even know where to begin, except maybe with how it felt in the beginning. Back then, being with Jamie was like being wrapped in the kind of warmth that makes you forget winter exists. He wasn't the father of my son, Milo, but he loved him like he was. When we first met, I was tired and jaded, divorced too young, trying to raise a 3-year-old alone. Jamie walked in with that slow grin, those hands that always knew how to hold without smothering, and the first night we spent together, I actually slept. That's how safe he made me feel. He made pancakes on Sundays and called them dinosaur fuel for Milo. He used to press soft kisses to the back of my neck while I folded laundry, and sometimes he'd pull me into the hallway just to dance with me, even if there was no music. But over time, those kisses grew lighter, like afterthoughts. I'd lean into him at night, and he'd still put his arm around me, but it started to feel more like a reflex than a want. We'd kiss, sure, but it started to feel like punctuation. A period at the end of a sentence that never quite finished. There was this one night in March. I remember because it had just rained, and the windows were foggy. Milo was asleep upstairs. Jamie and I were on the couch, me with my legs over his lap, him absently rubbing my calf. We were watching some crime show, but I wasn't paying attention. I was just watching him. I reached over and brushed my fingers along the collar of his shirt, teasing, smiling. "You always wear this one when you're trying to look like you don't care." He gave me a half smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "It's comfortable." That was it. No flirt back. No look that said, "I see you, I want you." Later that night, I pulled him into bed and kissed him. He kissed me back, but something about the way his hands moved felt distracted. Like he was thinking about work. Or dinner. Or anything else. We didn't have sex. We haven't in months. I don't say that with anger, just resignation. The kind that creeps in slowly and makes a home inside you. The thing is, it wasn't just physical. It was in the way he stopped asking me about my writing, or how I was sleeping, or if I was okay. It was in how he started staying late at the office more often, always promising to be home in time for bedtime stories, and slowly breaking that promise over and over until I stopped expecting it. The final moment, the one that won't leave me alone, wasn't even dramatic. I was standing at the sink, washing a pan, and he was leaning against the fridge with his travel mug, waiting for the coffee to brew. Milo had gone to his dad's for the weekend. It was just the two of us. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. And then he said it. Calm, quiet. "You should have married your son's real dad." I remember the way the soap clung to my knuckles. The way the faucet kept running. I turned to him, and he didn't say another word. He just walked to the bedroom, packed a bag, and left. No fight. No explanation. Just the echo of a sentence I still don't understand. And the worst part? I didn't run after him. Because deep down, I think I'd already known he was halfway gone. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks before that, when I reached for his hand at the farmer's market and he let me hold it, but his fingers never curled back around mine. That was the moment. That was when I knew. Let me know if you'd like a continuation or a new title to develop into a story. Perfect, here's a continuation and deepening of the same story, using your new instructions. We'll ground it further with everyday conflict, a key misunderstanding, and mismatched love languages that escalate emotional tension. Jamie was a paramedic. Always rushing. Always needed. He wore stress like a second skin, taut, humming, impossible to peel away. I used to admire it. The way he'd leave the house at midnight because someone out there couldn't breathe. How he'd come back smelling like adrenaline and rubber gloves and collapse onto the couch like he'd held the whole world together with his bare hands. But somewhere along the line, I stopped feeling like part of that world. We fought about groceries one night, stupid, I know. I'd asked him to pick up oat milk for Milo's cereal. He brought back whole milk. Marin, he said, tossing the carton into the fridge with a thud, you can't expect me to remember every little thing when I've had 2 heart attacks and a car crash on one shift. I stared at him. It wasn't about the milk. It never was. I just want to feel like you see me, I whispered. Like I matter as much as everyone else you're saving. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, cupped my face in his calloused hands, and kissed me hard, insistent. His way of ending arguments. Of proving he loved me. But my body tensed under his touch. Because I didn't want his lips. I wanted his presence. I wanted him to ask how my day was. To sit with me without his phone buzzing every 10 minutes. To tell me he liked the story I wrote, or noticed I'd been quieter lately, or remembered that oat milk means Milo doesn't get stomachaches. I pulled back. His eyes narrowed slightly. What? You said you feel unseen. I'm here. I'm showing you. No, I said, stepping away. You're touching me. That's not the same. He didn't understand. Not then. Maybe not ever. And I get it. His world was built on touch. Compressing chests, stopping bleeds, lifting broken bodies into ambulances. He saved lives with his hands. But I needed him to save this with his heart. That night, I curled up on the far edge of the bed, facing the window. He lay behind me, his hand resting heavy on my hip, like it always did. But it felt more like possession than comfort. I used to shift closer. That night, I stayed still. Frozen. A week later, we went to a family barbecue. Everyone was laughing. Milo had ketchup on his cheek. Jamie had a beer in one hand and his other draped around my shoulders like a trophy. I smiled. Played the part. But when I looked at him, his face was relaxed in a way I hadn't seen at home in months. Like being away from us was what gave him peace. On the drive back, I said, "You were really happy today." "Yeah," he said. Nice to not talk about problems for once. I didn't respond. Because to me, love was being able to talk about the hard things. But for him, maybe love meant avoiding them. Maybe he thought if he kissed me enough, held me enough, pulled me into bed at night, I'd stop needing anything more. But I needed to be known, not just touched. And he was a man who knew how to hold a body, but not how to hold a heart. Would you like me to continue this story further, or begin a completely new one with a different title, character background, and setting? Absolutely. Here's the next scene in the story, building on the emotional disconnect and silent resentment, with the kind of subtle physical interactions and emotional confusion you asked for. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast. I'd left it in too long again, lost in my own head while Milo talked about his science project. Jamie walked in still wearing his navy blue uniform pants, a gray shirt damp under the arms, and that damn smug smirk he always wore when he'd made it through a brutal shift. He dropped his duffel by the door and came up behind me while I was scraping char off the bread. Without a word, his hand slid across my lower back and rested just above my hip. Then smack, he playfully slapped my butt. I flinched. It wasn't hard. It wasn't aggressive. It was the kind of thing he used to do in passing, and I used to laugh. But now it just felt intrusive. Like I wasn't in on the joke anymore. He leaned down, voice low. "Miss me?" I forced a smile, kept my eyes on the crumbs. "Milo missed you. He was asking about your siren stories." Jamie didn't answer. His hand slid around my waist, pulled me gently into him. He pressed a kiss just behind my ear. His beard scratched a little. He smelled like coffee and latex gloves. I didn't move. Inside, I was screaming. React. Respond. Kiss him back. Just do something normal. But I felt like a marionette, waiting for strings that didn't exist. He turned me to face him anyway and looked down at me with that soft look I used to crave. "Hey," he said gently, brushing hair behind my ear. "You okay?" I nodded too quickly. Then he kissed me. Not rough. Not rushed. Just Jamie. Lips familiar and steady. A kiss that should have made me feel safe. But all I could think about was how I used to close my eyes and melt into him. Now, I just counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. When will he stop? When he pulled back, he looked at me a beat too long. He knew something was off. He just didn't know what. I backed away, pretending to check on the toast. "You hungry?" I asked too brightly. There's still some eggs left. Jamie didn't push it. He never did. He just nodded and went to take a shower. And I stood there gripping the edge of the counter, my stomach twisted into a fist. I hated this version of me. This coldness. This fake. But every time he touched me, I couldn't tell where his want ended and my obligation began. The door to the bathroom clicked shut, steam already curling beneath it. And in the quiet that followed, I pressed my fingers to my lips and whispered to myself, why does everything have to turn into sex? Let me know if you'd like the final chapter, the emotional breaking point, or want to start a new story from a fresh title and premise. Of course, here's the emotional climax of the story, where the protagonist's frustration finally boils over during a seemingly normal moment. It ties back to the title and concludes with raw, private self-reflection. We were at that overpriced Italian place he liked, the one with the red candles that melted into their own wine bottles and servers who memorized your wine order. Jamie had made the reservation after another long week of missed dinners and silent evenings. He was trying. I knew that. He'd even worn the burgundy shirt I once told him made his eyes look softer. Thought you could use a night off, he said as he held out my chair. Just us. No fire alarms, no spilled juice boxes, no clients screaming into dispatch. I smiled, tight-lipped. Sounds nice. It started fine. Small talk. Milo's school field trip. Jamie's idiot coworker who accidentally gave himself a mild concussion with a stretcher. The kind of stories I used to laugh at. Now they just made me tired. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, he reached across the table and took my hand. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. You've been somewhere else lately, he said, voice low. Is it work? Or something else? I froze. I hadn't expected him to ask. To notice. Then he added, if this is about Milo's dad again, babe, you've gotta stop worrying. I'm here. I've always been here. And, just like that, something inside me cracked. I pulled my hand back like it burned. This isn't about Milo's dad, I snapped. Jamie blinked. Okay, you keep acting like I'm some damaged single mom you saved. Like I should be grateful you stuck around. But you don't see me. You don't even try to see me anymore. He leaned back, clearly caught off guard. Where's this coming from? I felt the tears before I could stop them, sharp and hot and humiliating. You want to know where it's coming from? It's coming from the fact that I feel more like your obligation than your partner. That every time we kiss, I feel nothing. That I can't even remember the last time I felt like me around you. His face twisted, confused and defensive. So this is my fault? For trying? For loving you the only way I know how. I never asked you to fix me, I said, my voice cracking. And I sure as hell didn't ask you to replace anyone. I just wanted you to be here. Not physically. Emotionally. But all you ever do is touch me and expect that to be enough. He went quiet. Then, after a long pause, maybe you should have married your son's real dad if I'm such a disappointment. The words hit like a slap. My chair scraped loudly as I stood. Don't you dare throw that at me, I whispered. You don't get to say that and pretend it's just frustration. He didn't stop me when I walked out. Didn't call after me. Didn't even pay the bill before I left. Later, I sat alone on the edge of our bed, staring at a laundry basket full of socks that never matched and shirts that still smelled like his detergent. My chest ached from crying, but the tears had dried up. I hated how cruel I'd sounded. Hated that I'd said those things in public. Hated that maybe, just maybe, I'd pushed him too far to ever come back. But most of all, I hated the answer I kept circling in my mind. What if he was right? What if I should have married Milo's real dad? What if this entire time, I've been trying to build something solid out of guilt and longing, not love? I pressed my palms to my eyes, too tired to pray, too numb to scream. And all I could think again and again was, why does everything have to turn into sex? Let me know if you'd like an epilogue, e.g., him leaving, her rebuilding, or if you'd like to start a brand new story with a different title and premise. Absolutely. Here's the final emotional arc of this story, showing time passing, emotional distance growing, and the woman caught between guilt, longing, and the weight of a choice she's not sure she can make. We moved around each other like ghosts. The house was quiet in the wrong ways, not peaceful, just hollow. Like everything we used to be had been packed up and forgotten in the back of a closet we were both too scared to open. Jamie didn't say much anymore. He'd come home, nod hello, eat leftovers, and watch TV with the volume low. Sometimes he sat on the edge of Milo's bed after lights out, just rubbing his back until he fell asleep. I'd listen from the hallway, holding a mug I didn't really want, and feel something sharp and shapeless press against my ribs. I missed him. But I didn't know how to say it without also saying, I'm sorry for hurting you. I'm sorry for needing more than what you gave, even when you thought it was enough. One night, I found him in the garage. The car hood was up. He was leaning on the edge, elbows on metal, staring blankly like he forgot what he was doing. I didn't mean it, I said quietly. He didn't look at me. I didn't mean that you don't matter. Or that you're not enough. I felt so alone, and I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I was blaming you. His jaw tightened. He wiped his hands on an old towel, slow and deliberate. You weren't blaming me. You were telling the truth. And I couldn't handle it. I took a step closer, but not too close. We hadn't touched in almost 2 weeks. He finally turned toward me. His eyes were red around the edges, tired, but not angry. Just hollowed out. I kept thinking, he said, voice low, that if I worked hard enough, loved hard enough, you'd feel it. That you'd know. But maybe I loved you in a way you didn't need. And maybe I didn't even ask how you wanted to be loved. That was the moment I saw him, really saw him, not as the man who failed me, but as the man who had tried. Who didn't know how to speak my language but still showed up, even when it hurt. I wanted to reach for him. But my arms felt heavy. Because love wasn't just a feeling. It was a decision. One I hadn't made in a long time. That night, we sat across from each other at the dinner table. Milo told us about a spider in the school bathroom, waving his fork in the air dramatically. Jamie laughed, really laughed, and I felt my chest ache with the memory of how things used to be. After Milo went to bed, we sat in silence. The clock ticked. Jamie cleared the plates. When he came back, he leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. Do you still want this? He asked. And for a moment, I just stared at him, my throat thick. The guilt. The grief. The years of trying to balance motherhood and partnership and still remember who the hell I was underneath it all. I looked at him and thought, he's not the villain. He never was. We both just got tired in different directions. And now I had to choose, try again or walk away. I swallowed hard. My fingers curled into fists beneath the table. I don't know, I whispered. But it was the first honest thing I'd said in a long time. Would you like an epilogue, perhaps showing the final choice she makes, weeks or months later? Or shall we begin a brand new story from a different title and angle? Of course. Since the story's tone anchored in the title, he told me I should have married my son's real dad, then left without ever saying goodbye leans toward loss, disconnection, and emotional estrangement. This final part will follow the bittersweet ending where the woman realizes it's too late. But we'll keep it grounded and emotionally honest, with a final moment of physical closeness to give it the weight you asked for. 2 nights after I told him I don't know, I found him asleep on the couch again. The throw blanket only covered half of him. One socked foot was hanging off the edge, the TV still on but muted. The glow of it made him look younger, somehow. Softer. I stood there for a minute, just watching him breathe. The guilt hit like a wave. Followed, as always, by that unbearable ache, not for the man I missed, but for the version of us that had stopped existing months ago. Maybe even years. I walked over quietly and knelt by the couch. Brushed a piece of hair from his forehead. He stirred, but didn't wake. I'm sorry, I whispered. I wanted this to work. I really did. I leaned in and kissed his temple. His skin was warm. Familiar. It made my throat close up. He exhaled in his sleep, shifting slightly, but didn't open his eyes. In the morning, he was gone. No note. No bag missing. Just gone. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom. His boots still by the door. But I knew. I knew that was the moment he chose to leave, not with a suitcase or slammed door, but with silence. A final kind of silence. A week later, he texted. I didn't mean to hurt you. But I can't keep holding on to something that keeps slipping through my hands. I sat with that message for an hour before I replied. I understand. I'll always be grateful for how much you loved my son. And how hard you tried. We didn't say more. That night, I folded laundry on the bed, the house still except for Milo's breathing down the hall. I picked up Jamie's old sweatshirt, the one he used to wear on Sundays, and held it to my chest. I cried quietly. Not just for him, but for the version of myself that used to believe love was enough, even when it was unspoken, even when it didn't fit. And that's when I finally admitted it to myself, to the silence, to whatever was left in that house. He didn't walk away because he stopped loving me. He walked away because we forgot how to love each other the way we needed to be loved. Let me know if you'd like a new story from a different title, tone, and cast. I'm ready whenever you are. Absolutely. Here is the closing monologue of the story, spoken directly by the woman as if she's sitting across from the listener, unguarded, reflective, and finally at peace. It carries emotional clarity and a message that lingers. Final monologue. Marin, you know what's strange? I used to think love was about trying hard enough. That if two people showed up every day, paid the bills, kissed goodnight, made each other coffee, then that counted. That was love. But now I know love without emotional safety feels like being hugged underwater. You're held, but you can't breathe. I spent years trying to want what I was supposed to want. Trying to match his touch with my heart, even when my body started pulling away. And I hated myself for that. For not reacting right. For overthinking every kiss. For feeling numb when I should have felt close. But I think what I really hated was how invisible I felt, how touch became a substitute for tenderness. How every moment that was supposed to bring us together made me feel lonelier than being alone. I kept blaming myself. For needing too much. For being complicated. But maybe I wasn't too much. Maybe we just didn't know how to meet each other halfway. Jamie wasn't a bad man. He showed up when he could. He loved Milo fiercely. He loved me in the way he knew how. But sometimes love isn't enough when the language is wrong. When one person wants to talk and the other wants to touch. When silence becomes the safest space between you and your heart learns how to hide there. What I've learned. Desire fades when you don't feel seen. Affection turns cold when it's not rooted in understanding. And no matter how much someone wants to love you, it doesn't mean they know how. I used to think the worst thing was being left. But honestly, the worst thing is staying when you're already gone. So if you're listening to this, if you're sitting in your car or folding laundry or lying next to someone who doesn't reach for you anymore, I just want to say this. It's not selfish to want to feel held on the inside. And sometimes letting go isn't giving up. It's finally telling the truth. Be one.